Terrence Williams never planned to fall in love. At 35, he had built his real estate empire with careful planning and strategic connections. Marriage was just another business move. At least that's what he told himself when he proposed to Amara Johnson after only 6 months of dating. They met at a charity gala where Amara was working part-time to help pay for law school. She handed him a glass of champagne, and their fingers touched for just a moment too long. Terrence wasn't used to women who didn't seem impressed by his wealth or family name. Most people in town knew the Williams family owned half the waterfront properties and had their name on at least one building at the local university. "You're not from around here, are you?" he asked, noticing her slight accent. "Just moved for law school," Amara replied with a smile that lit up her deep brown eyes. "And no, I didn't research every rich family before I came, if that's what you're asking." Terrence laughed. A real laugh, not the practiced chuckle he used at business functions. Something about her directness cut through years of practiced social armor. That night, he found himself talking about books and travel instead of property values and investment portfolios. Their courtship moved quickly. Terrence showered Amara with gifts, designer clothes, weekend trips, and eventually a diamond ring that made her gasp. "It's too much," she whispered, when he proposed at a rooftop restaurant overlooking the city. "Nothing's too much for you," he said smoothly, already imagining how impressive she would look by his side at business functions. His mother had been dropping hints about grandchildren, and his father had mentioned more than once that settling down would help his image with more conservative clients. What Terrence didn't tell Amara was how perfect her timing was. His family's company was pursuing a major development deal with investors who valued family men. A wife pursuing a law degree, especially one as beautiful and charismatic as Amara, would be the perfect accessory to close the deal. The wedding planning revealed the first cracks in their relationship. Amara wanted something small and meaningful. Terrence and his family pushed for an extravagant affair with over 300 guests, most of whom Amara had never met. "These people are important business connections," Terrence explained when Amara questioned the guest list. "The wedding isn't just about us." 2 weeks before the wedding, Terrence's father Richard called them both to his home office. The older man sat behind a massive desk, his silver hair perfectly combed, his expression serious. "Before we welcome you officially into the family," Richard said to Amara, "we need to discuss the prenuptial agreement." Amara's smile faltered. "A prenup?" "Standard procedure for our family," Richard continued, sliding a thick document across the desk. "The Williams family has substantial assets to protect." Terrence watched Amara's face carefully. This was the moment many of his relationships had ended in the past. Women who claimed to love him for himself suddenly showed their true colors when faced with the reality that they wouldn't get their hands on the Williams fortune without conditions. "I understand," Amara said quietly after a moment. "My parents didn't raise me to take what isn't mine." Relief flooded through Terrence. She had passed the test. Later that night, as they drove home in silence, he reached for her hand. "Thank you for understanding about the prenup. It's just business." Amara nodded, but her hand felt stiff in his. "I would have appreciated if you had mentioned it before your father did." "I didn't think it was a big deal," Terrence shrugged. "It's just paperwork." 3 days before the wedding, Amara sat with a notary and signed the agreement. She had tried to read through it, but the legal language was dense, and Terrence had assured her it was all standard. His family's lawyer had rushed her through the signing, pointing out where to initial as he checked his watch repeatedly. "Don't worry, honey," the older attorney said with a paternal pat on her hand. "This is just a formality. Most of these things collect dust in a drawer somewhere." The wedding was exactly what Terrence had envisioned. Elaborate floral arrangements, a 7-tier cake, and photographs that would look perfect in business magazines. Amara was stunning in her gown, though her smile seemed to grow more strained as the evening progressed and she was introduced to one business associate after another. "You look tired," Terrence whispered during their first dance. "Just overwhelmed," she admitted. "There are so many people here I don't know." "You'll learn them all eventually," he promised. "Many of these connections will be useful when you finish law school." The honeymoon in Bali was the happiest 2 weeks of their marriage. Away from his family and business, Terrence relaxed. They swam in crystal-clear waters, ate dinner on the beach, and made love as the waves crashed outside their villa. Amara told him stories about growing up with 4 siblings, how they shared everything and how her parents had worked multiple jobs to send them all to college. "You're going to be an amazing lawyer," Terrence said one night as they watched the sunset. "I'm proud of you." For that moment he meant it. In the golden light, with salt on their skin, and without the pressures of real life, he could imagine a future where their marriage was more than a business arrangement. Reality returned as soon as their plane landed. Terrence had 3 development meetings the next day, and Amara had classes. They settled into a routine where they often went days seeing each other only in passing. Terrence worked late most nights, while Amara studied until she fell asleep, surrounded by textbooks. 6 months into their marriage, Terrence's family hosted a dinner to celebrate a major business acquisition. As they dressed for the event, Amara suggested she might skip it to prepare for an important exam. "That's not an option," Terrence said, his voice suddenly cold. "The Johnsons will be there, and they specifically asked if they could meet my new wife. I have an exam worth 40% of my grade," Amara explained, frustration evident in her voice. "And I have clients worth millions to our company," Terrence countered. "You can study tomorrow." Amara went to the dinner but barely spoke. Afterward, they had their first real fight. "I feel like a prop," she said, tears streaming down her face. "Like I'm just here to look good on your arm while you make deals." "That's not fair," Terrence protested, though a small voice inside him acknowledged the truth in her words. Marriage is about supporting each other. Sometimes that means showing up when it matters. "When it matters to you," Amara corrected him. "What about when things matter to me?" Terrence pulled her into his arms, not wanting to continue the argument. "I'm sorry. I'll do better." He meant it in the moment, but old habits were hard to break. The Williams family had always put business first. His own mother had rescheduled his birthday parties if they conflicted with important functions. That was just how things were done. As their first anniversary approached, Terrence noticed Amara becoming more distant. She spent more time at the law library and less time at home. When he suggested they take a trip to celebrate their anniversary, she seemed hesitant. "I thought you'd be excited," he said, showing her the brochure for a luxury resort. "It looks beautiful," she admitted, "but I have a summer internship opportunity that would really help my career." "An internship?" Terrence couldn't hide his displeasure. "You don't need to worry about that. When you graduate, you'll have your pick of positions through my connections." Amara's expression hardened. "I want to earn my place, not have it handed to me because of who I married." The argument that followed revealed how far apart they had grown. Terrence couldn't understand why she wouldn't take advantage of his connections, while Amara felt he didn't respect her desire to succeed on her own merits. They went on the anniversary trip, but it lacked the magic of their honeymoon. Terrence spent most mornings on his phone with business calls, while Amara read case studies by the pool. They were together but separate, the distance between them growing despite the beautiful surroundings. On their last night, after too many glasses of wine, Terrence made a confession. "I never thought I'd get married," he said, staring out at the ocean. "My father always said marriage was 70% business, 30% companionship if you're lucky." Amara's eyes reflected the moonlight. "And what do you think now?" Terrence hesitated. The truth was, he still saw their marriage largely as his father had described. But looking at Amara, he felt a twinge of something else. Regret, perhaps, for what their relationship could have been if he'd approached it differently. "I think," he said slowly, "that I'm lucky to have you." It wasn't a lie, but it wasn't the whole truth either. As they packed to return home the next day, Terrence noticed Amara carefully folding a brochure for the law firm where she hoped to intern. He said nothing, but a seed of resentment took root in his mind. Despite everything he had given her, she still wanted more, a life and identity separate from him. What Terrence didn't understand yet was that the prenuptial agreement his family had insisted upon contained a fatal flaw. one that would eventually change everything. But for now, as they returned to their beautiful home and separate lives, the document sat forgotten in a drawer, a ticking time bomb in their already fragile marriage. 3 years into their marriage, the distance between Terrence and Amara had grown from a crack to a canyon. They lived together in their sprawling suburban home, but they might as well have been on different planets. Amara was halfway through law school now, excelling in her classes despite the growing tension at home. She had earned a coveted internship at Blackwell & Associates, one of the city's most respected firms, without using Terrence's connections. Every morning she woke before sunrise to study before heading to class or the firm, returning home long after Terrence had eaten dinner alone. On the rare evenings they were both home, conversation was strained. Terrence would ask about her day, but his attention would drift to his phone before she finished answering. Amara would inquire about his latest development project, only to receive vague replies that made it clear he didn't think she would understand. Or worse, that she didn't need to know. "The Henderson deal is moving forward," Terrence announced one night over a dinner Amara had rushed to prepare between study sessions. "We should close next month." Amara looked up from her plate. "That's the waterfront property, right? The one where the community center is now." Terrence's fork paused halfway to his mouth. "How do you know about that?" "I read the local papers," Amara said. "There's been some pushback from the neighborhood. They're worried about losing the only youth program in the area." Terrence's expression hardened. Business is business. The city council already approved the rezoning. The Henderson property will bring jobs and tax revenue, and push out families who've lived there for generations, Amara added quietly. "Don't tell me you're becoming one of those bleeding heart activists now," Terrence said with a laugh that held no humor. "That's not what I need in a wife." The words hung in the air between them. What I need in a wife. Not what he wanted in a partner or loved about his spouse, but what he required, like a particular feature in a luxury car. Amara set down her fork carefully. "And what exactly do you need in a wife, Terrence?" He didn't answer immediately, taking a long sip of his wine instead. "Support. Understanding that business sometimes requires tough decisions. Someone who makes life easier, not more complicated." "I see," Amara said, her voice steady despite the hurt blooming in her chest. "And have I made your life more complicated?" "Let's not do this tonight," Terrence sighed. "I have an early meeting tomorrow." But Amara had reached her breaking point. 3 years of swallowing her thoughts, of rearranging her schedule to accommodate his, of watching him dismiss her ambitions as if they were cute hobbies rather than her life's work. "No, let's do this now," she insisted. "Because I'm starting to wonder what I'm doing here, Terrence. We barely talk. We rarely spend time together. Sometimes I feel like I'm just a convenient addition to your business portfolio." Terrence's jaw tightened. "That's not fair. I've given you everything. This house, the car, the clothes, things," Amara cut in. "You've given me things. But when was the last time you asked about my classes, my internship, the case I've been working on for weeks?" "I didn't realize I needed to pretend to be interested in legal briefs to be a good husband," Terrence snapped. Amara pushed back from the table. "And I didn't realize I needed to pretend your business matters more than my career to be a good wife." She left the dining room without waiting for his response, locking herself in the guest bedroom where she'd been sleeping more and more frequently. Through the door, she heard Terrence's phone ring, followed by his smooth, professional voice as he answered it, all traces of their argument instantly erased. The next morning, Amara found a small velvet box on the kitchen counter with a note. "Sorry about last night. Dinner at LeBlanc, 7 p.m. Inside was a pair of diamond earrings that must have cost more than her tuition for the semester. It was Terrence's pattern. Every argument ended with an expensive gift, but never a real conversation. The jewelry box joined others in her drawer, beautiful trinkets that felt more like payoffs than presents. That evening, Amara didn't go to LeBlanc. She stayed at the law library until midnight, then slept on her friend Zoe's couch. When she returned home the next day, Terrence acted as if nothing had happened, though the earrings had disappeared from the counter. 2 weeks later, Amara was organizing files for a case at her internship when she came across a familiar name, Henderson Properties. Curious, she scanned the document, a petition from community members challenging the rezoning of the waterfront property. According to their research, the environmental impact assessment had been rushed and potentially falsified. That night, when Terrence mentioned the Henderson deal again, Amara hesitated. Should she tell him what she'd seen? Once, she wouldn't have questioned it. But now, looking at the stranger across the table who happened to be her husband, she kept the information to herself. The following weekend, Terrence had a golf game with clients. Amara used the opportunity to catch up on laundry, something their housekeeper usually handled but that Amara occasionally did herself to feel some normalcy in their increasingly sterile relationship. As she emptied Terrence's suit pockets, she found a receipt from a restaurant she didn't recognize, dated for an evening when he'd claimed to be working late. The amount was for 2 expensive meals and a bottle of champagne. Her stomach knotted as she set it aside, telling herself there could be an innocent explanation. But as she continued sorting clothes, she found a matchbook from the Grand Hotel downtown with a phone number scrawled inside. And later, a long blonde, hair on his jacket collar that couldn't possibly be hers. Amara sat on the laundry room floor, evidence of her husband's betrayal scattered around her. She had suspected for months but had pushed the thoughts away, focusing instead on school and her internship. Now, confronted with proof, she felt strangely calm, perhaps because in some way, this made her decision easier. When Terrence returned from golf, flushed with success and expensive scotch, Amara was waiting in the living room. "We need to talk," she said. Terrence loosened his tie. "Can it wait?" "I'm beat." "No," Amara replied, her voice firm. "It can't wait." She placed the receipt, matchbook, and blonde hair on the coffee table between them. Terrence's expression didn't change, but a muscle in his jaw twitched, the tell he had when bluffing in poker. "It's not what you think," he began. "Don't," Amara interrupted. "Please don't insult me by lying." Terrence's facade cracked then, anger flashing in his eyes. "What do you expect, Amara? You're never here. When you are, you're buried in books or talking about your internship. A man has needs." "So do I," Amara replied quietly. "I needed a husband who respected me, who supported my dreams the way I've supported yours, who didn't cheat at the first sign of difficulty." "First sign?" Terrence laughed bitterly. "Our entire marriage has been difficult. I thought I was getting a wife, not a law student who treats our home like a hotel." The words sliced through Amara's last hopes for their relationship. "Is that really how you see me? After 3 years?" Terrence ran a hand through his hair, suddenly looking tired. "I don't know anymore, Amara. This isn't what I thought marriage would be." "Me neither," she admitted. "Maybe we should consider—" "Don't say divorce," Terrence cut in quickly. "My family would never accept that. The business implications alone." Of course, the business implications. Not the emotional toll, not the broken promises, but how it would look to his clients and family. "What do you suggest then?" Amara asked. "Counseling, maybe?" Terrence offered, though his tone lacked conviction. "We could try to work through this." Amara studied her husband's face, searching for any sign that he truly wanted to save their marriage. Instead, she saw calculation, the same expression he wore when negotiating a difficult business deal. "All right," she said finally. "We can try counseling." Relief washed over Terrence's features. He hadn't expected her to agree so easily. "Great, I'll have my assistant find someone." "I'll find someone," Amara corrected him. "Someone neutral who isn't on your family's payroll." Terrence frowned but nodded. "Fine, whatever you think is best." But Terrence never made it to their first counseling appointment. An emergency meeting came up. Or the second when he had to fly to Chicago unexpectedly. By the third missed session, Amara went alone, pouring out her frustrations to the sympathetic therapist. "It sounds like you're the only one trying to save this marriage," Dr. Chen observed. "I'm not even sure why I'm trying anymore," Amara confessed. except that divorce feels like failure. Sometimes the bravest thing we can do is admit when something isn't working, Dr. Chen replied gently. That night, Amara stayed late at the law library again, researching divorce laws in their state. The prenuptial agreement she'd signed weighed heavily on her mind. She remembered how rushed the signing had been, how the attorney had hurried her through the process without explaining the terms fully. Meanwhile, Terrence was making his own preparations. He had consulted privately with his family's attorney about protecting his assets. On the advice of his father, he began moving money into accounts Amara didn't know about, documenting every instance when she wasn't home, building a case for abandonment if necessary. At dinner with his parents the following Sunday, which Amara missed due to exam preparation, Terrence's father broached the subject directly. "Your mother and I are concerned about your marriage," Richard Williams said, cutting his steak with precision. "The girl is never around. People are starting to talk." "We're working through some things," Terrence replied vaguely. "Working through things means compromise," his mother added. "Has she considered taking a break from that law school nonsense? No wife of a Williams man has ever needed to work." Terrence didn't defend Amara's choices. Instead, he nodded along, as his parents outlined what they considered a proper marriage, one where the wife's primary responsibility was supporting her husband's career and raising children. The kind of marriage his parents had, where his mother had abandoned her own dreams of becoming an architect to host dinner parties for his father's clients. By the time he returned home, Terrence had convinced himself that Amara was the problem. If she would just adjust her priorities, their marriage could work. He rehearsed what he would say, preparing a speech about family expectations and her duties as his wife. But when he walked through the door, he found Amara asleep on the couch, law books spread around her face finally peaceful after weeks of tension. For a brief moment, he remembered why he had been drawn to her determination, her intelligence, her unwillingness to simply follow the path others laid out for her. The realization was uncomfortable. It would be easier if he could just blame her entirely. Instead, he covered her with a throw blanket and went upstairs alone, his prepared speech unsaid. The next morning, Amara woke to find a note from Terrence. "Gone to work early. Let's talk tonight." It was the most direct communication they'd had in weeks. That evening, Amara prepared dinner, a peace offering of sorts. She had decided to give their marriage one last chance, to lay everything on the table and see if anything remained worth saving. But Terrence never came home for dinner. At midnight, he texted, "Working late, don't wait up." Amara wrapped the untouched food and went to bed, her decision made. In the morning, she would contact a divorce attorney, not the one who had rushed her through the prenup signing, but someone who would actually look out for her interests. What she didn't know was that Terrence had spent the evening not at work, but with his father and their family attorney, finalizing a strategy for divorce that would leave Amara with as little as possible. The prenuptial agreement they had pressured her to sign would be their shield, protecting the Williams fortune from what they now viewed as a failed investment. Neither of them realized that the document they were both counting on, he to protect his wealth, she to understand what she might be entitled to, contained a critical error that would eventually change everything. But that discovery was still to come, hidden in the future like a time bomb waiting to explode. The morning Amara passed the bar exam, she expected at least a perfunctory congratulations from Terrence. She had studied for months, sacrificing sleep and any remaining semblance of a social life. The achievement represented everything she had worked toward since before their marriage, a goal she had never hidden or diminished. Despite Terrence's growing disdain, she checked her phone repeatedly throughout the celebration lunch with her classmates, but no message came. By evening, as she returned to their too-large house, disappointment had hardened into resignation. Terrence's car wasn't in the driveway. Lately, that was more common than not. She let herself in, dropping her keys in the crystal dish by the door, a wedding gift from one of his mother's friends. The house was silent except for the steady tick of the grandfather clock in the hallway, counting down seconds in a marriage that had long since expired. Amara kicked off her heels and padded to the kitchen for a glass of water. That's when she saw it, a thick manila envelope on the counter with her name written in Terrence's precise handwriting. No congratulations card, no flowers, just an envelope. Her hands trembled slightly as she opened it, though she already knew what she would find. The divorce papers weren't a surprise. In many ways, they were a relief, an end to the pretense they'd been maintaining for months. What caught her off guard was the yellow sticky note attached to the first page. My attorney. Will contact yours. Don't make this difficult. Don't make this difficult. As if she had been the one complicating their relationship, as if her pursuit of education and career was an inconvenience rather than the ambition she'd been clear about from day one. Amara sank onto a kitchen stool, divorce papers spread before her. She should feel something, shouldn't she? Grief? Anger? Instead, there was only a hollow sense of inevitability. They had been moving toward this moment since their honeymoon ended. Two people with fundamentally different values trying to build a life on a foundation of sand. She was still sitting there when her phone rang. Zoe, her closest friend from law, school. Tell me you're celebrating. Zoe's voice was bright with excitement. You killed that exam, girl. Amara swallowed hard. Terrence filed for divorce. The silence on the other end lasted only a moment before Zoe recovered. Oh, honey, are you okay? Do you want me to come over? I'm fine, Amara said, surprising herself with the truth of it. Really, we've been heading this way for a long time. Still, to do it on the day you passed the bar? That's cold. That's... Terrence, Amara replied, a bitter laugh escaping her. Always making sure I know where his priorities lie. And it's never been me. After hanging up, Amara poured herself a glass of wine, the expensive kind Terrence kept for business associates, and carried the divorce papers to her home office. The room had once been intended as a nursery, back when they'd still talked about having children. Now it held her law books and a desk where she studied when the tension between them became too suffocating. She read through the documents carefully, her newly minted legal knowledge allowing her to understand exactly what Terrence was proposing, or rather, demanding. According to these terms, she would walk away with only what she had brought into the marriage, which was practically nothing. No alimony, no share in the home they'd lived in for 3 years, not even a portion of the art they had purchased, together on their anniversary trip to Santa Fe. The prenuptial agreement was referenced throughout, cited as the controlling document that made his terms non-negotiable. Amara tried to remember the details of what she had signed, but the memory was hazy. A rushed meeting, a thick stack of papers, Terrence's family attorney pointing to signature lines while checking his watch. She would need her own lawyer now. Someone who wasn't intimidated by the Williams name or their fleet of high-priced attorneys. Despite her exhaustion, Amara opened her laptop and began researching divorce attorneys in their city, making a list of names to call in the morning. 2 days later, Amara sat across from Diane Rossi, a divorce attorney with a reputation for being both brilliant and ruthless. The older woman's office was smaller than Amara had expected, but the walls were lined with credentials and photographs of Diane with various well-known figures. So, Diane said after Amara had explained her situation, you signed a prenup without having your own attorney review it? Amara flushed with embarrassment. I was young and in love, and rushed. They made it seem like a formality. Diane's expression softened slightly. You'd be surprised how often I hear that. The Williams family has a reputation for protecting their assets aggressively. Do you have a copy of the prenup? No, Amara admitted. I never received one. Diane made a note. We'll request it during discovery. In the meantime, tell me everything you remember about the signing. Where did it happen? Who was present? Any details you can recall? Amara closed her eyes, trying to picture that day. It was at the Williams family home, Terrence's father's office. There was a notary, Terrence's father, and their family attorney. Baldwin, I think his name was. Thomas Baldwin? Yes, that sounds right. Diane's pen paused. Interesting. And the notary? Do you remember who that was? Amara shook her Head. Someone from Baldwin's office, I think. It all happened so fast. That's helpful, Diane said, making another note. Now let's talk about what you want from this divorce. The question caught Amara off guard. She had been so focused on what Terrence was trying to take from her that she hadn't considered what she might ask for herself. I just want what's fair, she said finally. I supported him through major business expansions. I attended his functions, entertained his clients. I put my own career on hold multiple times for his convenience. And you want compensation for that, Diane stated. Yes, Amara realized. I do. The next few weeks passed in a blur of legal motions and document requests. Amara moved out of the house and into a small apartment near her new job at Blackwell & Associates, where she had been hired as a junior associate following her internship. The firm was understanding about her situation, even allowing her some flexibility to deal with divorce proceedings. Then came the day of their first mediation session. Amara arrived at the downtown law offices 10 minutes early. Professionally, dressed in a navy suit, her case files organized in her briefcase. She had prepared for this meeting like a court appearance, reviewing all the financial documents and practicing her responses to likely arguments. Terrence arrived exactly on time, flanked by his father and 2 attorneys. He barely glanced at Amara as they were shown into the conference room, taking a seat directly across from her at the large table. His expression was impassive, the face he wore during difficult business negotiations. The mediator, a retired judge named Harriet Powell, introduced herself and outlined the process. Our goal today is to see if we can reach an equitable division of assets without needing to go to court. I've reviewed the preliminary filings from both parties. Thomas Baldwin, the Williams family attorney, spoke first. This should be straightforward, Your Honor. The prenuptial agreement Mrs. Williams signed clearly outlines the terms of separation. We're prepared to offer a courtesy payment of $50,000 to expedite matters, though this is not required by the agreement. Diane Rossi smiled thinly. We'll need to see the original prenuptial agreement first. My client was never provided with a copy. Baldwin reached into his briefcase and removed a document. Here it is, fully executed and notarized. As you'll see, Mrs. Williams has no claim to the Williams family assets or businesses. The mediator reviewed the document, then passed copies to Diane and Amara. As Amara scanned the pages, she was shocked by the one-sided terms. According to this, she had agreed to walk away with nothing, not even personal items acquired during the marriage. I don't remember agreeing to these terms, she said, looking up at Terrence. This isn't what you told me I was signing, Terrence shrugged. You had the opportunity to read it. Your client was provided ample time to review the document, Baldwin added smoothly. She chose to sign it. The law is clear on this matter. Diane leaned close to Amara. Is this your signature? Amara examined the last page. Yes, but then we'll need time to consult, Diane told the mediator. May we have the room for 15 minutes? Judge Powell nodded, and everyone except Amara and her attorney left the conference room. As soon as the door closed, Diane turned to her. This prenup is extremely restrictive, but there might be issues with how it was executed. You said you weren't given time to read it thoroughly, or have your own counsel review it. That could be grounds for challenging its validity. Will that work? Amara asked. It's a long shot, Diane admitted. The Williams family has significant influence in this city, but it's worth trying. When the others returned, Diane informed them that they would be challenging the validity of the prenuptial agreement based on procedural irregularities. Baldwin laughed, not bothering to hide his disdain. Good luck with that, he said. The document is ironclad. The rest of the mediation was tense and unproductive. Every offer Diane made was rejected outright by Terrence's team. By the end, it was clear they would need to proceed to court. As they gathered their papers to leave, Terrence stopped beside Amara's chair. You're making this harder than it needs to be, he said quietly. Take the $50,000 and move on with your life. Amara looked up at the man she had once loved, searching for any sign of the person who had laughed with her on beaches in Bali, who had once told her he was proud of her ambitions. She found nothing but cold calculation. This isn't about money, Terrence, she replied. It's about respect. Something you've never given me. His jaw tightened. Don't do this, Amara. You won't win against my family. Maybe not, she acknowledged. But I'll know I stood up for myself. 2 days later, Amara was working late at Blackwell & Associates when her phone rang. It was Diane. They've scheduled the divorce signing for next Thursday, her attorney informed her. Judge Wilson will preside. He's friendly with the Williams family. So we've lost before we've begun, Amara said, disappointment washing over her. Not necessarily, Diane replied. I've filed our challenge to the prenup. We'll present our arguments at the hearing. But Amara, you should prepare yourself for the possibility that the judge will enforce the agreement. I understand, Amara said. Thank you for fighting for me. The night before the hearing, Amara couldn't sleep. She paced her small apartment, reviewing the terms of the prenup again and again, looking for anything they might have missed. Around 2 a.m, she noticed something odd. The notary stamp on the document was dated 3 days after she remembered signing it. She immediately texted Diane, who responded despite the late hour. Good catch. We'll add it to our arguments. The yow. Next morning, Amara dressed carefully in a conservative black suit, her hair pulled back in a neat bun. She wanted to project confidence and professionalism, even as anxiety churned in her stomach. This hearing would determine not just her financial future, but whether the 3 years she had invested in this marriage would be recognized as having any value at all. The courtroom was nearly empty when she arrived with Diane. Terrence was already there, sitting with his father and Baldwin at the plaintiff's table. As she took her seat at the defense table, Amara noticed Terrence leaning over to whisper something to Baldwin. Both men laughed, and the sound echoed in the quiet room. Judge Wilson entered and everyone rose. He was an older man with silver hair and reading glasses perched on the end of his nose. Amara recognized him from photographs in Terrence's father's study. They had played golf together for years. The proceedings began with Baldwin presenting the prenuptial agreement and arguing for its enforcement. He spoke confidently, citing precedents and emphasizing Amara's signature on the document. Throughout his presentation, Terrence maintained a smug expression, occasionally exchanging knowing glances with his father. When it was Diane's turn, she methodically outlined the problems with how the prenup had been executed, the lack of independent counsel for Amara, the rushed nature of the signing, and most importantly, the discrepancy in the notary date. Your Honor, Diane concluded, these irregularities suggest that the agreement may not have been properly executed. At minimum, we request a continuance to investigate the circumstances of the notarization. Judge Wilson adjusted his glasses. Mr. Baldwin, what do you say to these allegations? Baldwin rose smoothly. Your Honor, these are desperate attempts to invalidate a legally binding document. The notary date is clearly a minor clerical error, not evidence of impropriety. Mrs. Williams signed the agreement of her own free will. And the lack of independent counsel? The judge asked. Not required by law, Your Honor. Mrs. Williams was informed of her right to seek counsel and chose not to do so. The judge nodded, seemingly satisfied with this explanation. I've reviewed the agreement and find no compelling reason to invalidate it. The prenuptial agreement will be enforced as written. Amara felt the blood drain from her face. Just like that, with barely any consideration, 3 years of her life had been deemed worthless. Now, Judge Wilson continued, let's proceed with finalizing the divorce. What followed was a blur of legal formalities. Amara signed where Diane indicated, her hand moving mechanically while her mind struggled to process what was happening. Across the table, Terrence signed with flourish, a smile playing at the corners of his mouth. When the final document was signed, Terrence laughed, an ugly sound filled with triumph rather than joy. Glad that's done, he said to Baldwin, not bothering to lower his voice. Easiest 50 grand I ever spent. Amara gathered her belongings, dignity the only thing she had left to hold on to. As she stood to leave, Terrence caught her eye across the table. No hard feelings. he said with a smirk. It was fun while it lasted. The cruelty of his dismissal after 3 years together struck Amara like a physical blow, but she refused to let him see her pain. Instead, she straightened her shoulders and met his gaze directly. "Goodbye, Terrence," she said simply, then turned and walked away, head held high despite the ache in her chest. Outside the courtroom, Diane caught up with her. "I'm sorry, Amara. We did everything we could." "I know," Amara replied. "Thank you for trying. What will you do now?" Amara took a deep breath, forcing back tears that threatened to fall. "The only thing I can do. Move forward. Focus on my career. Build a life that doesn't depend on anyone else." What neither of them knew as they walked out of the courthouse was that the story was far from over. The prenuptial agreement that Judge Wilson had so quickly enforced contained a fatal flaw, one that would eventually be discovered by someone with fresh eyes and meticulous attention to detail. Someone who wasn't intimidated by the Williams' name or their influence. But for now, Amara left the courthouse feeling defeated, unaware that in a few months' time, everything would change. The scales of justice, currently tipped so heavily in Terrence's favor, were about to find their balance in a way no one expected. 3 months after the divorce, Amara threw herself into her work at Blackwell & Associates. The firm's glass and steel office tower became more familiar than her small apartment, where she rarely spent time except to sleep. Work was her salvation, the one place where her intelligence and dedication were valued, where the Williams name held no power. On a rainy Tuesday morning, Leonard Blackwell, the firm's founding partner, called Amara into his office. Rain streaked down the floor-to-ceiling windows behind his desk, turning the city into a watercolor painting of grays and blues. "Take a seat, Amara," he said, gesturing to one of the leather chairs facing his desk. "How are you set?" Terrence arrived exactly on time, flanked by his father and 2 attorneys. He barely glanced at Amara as they were shown into the conference room, taking a seat directly across from her at the large table. His expression was impassive, the face he wore during difficult business negotiations. The mediator, a retired judge named Harriet Powell, introduced herself and outlined the process. "Our goal today is to see if we can reach an equitable division of assets without needing to go to court. I've reviewed the preliminary filings from both parties." Thomas Baldwin, the Williams family attorney, spoke first. "This should be straightforward, Your Honor. The prenuptial agreement Mrs. Williams signed clearly outlines the terms of separation. We're prepared to offer a courtesy payment of $50,000 to expedite matters, though this is not required by the agreement." Diane Rossi smiled thinly. "We'll need to see the original prenuptial agreement first. My client was never provided with a copy." Baldwin reached into his briefcase and removed a document. "Here it is, fully executed and notarized. As you'll see, Mrs. Williams has no claim to the Williams family assets or businesses." The mediator reviewed the document, then passed copies to Diane and Amara. As Amara scanned the pages, she was shocked by the one-sided terms. According to this, she had agreed to walk away with nothing, not even personal items acquired during the marriage. "I don't remember agreeing to these terms," she said, looking up at Terrence. "This isn't what you told me I was signing." Terrence shrugged. "You had the opportunity to read it. Your client was provided ample time to review the document," Baldwin added smoothly. "She chose to sign it. The law is clear on this matter." Diane leaned close to Amara. "Is this your signature?" Amara examined the last page. "Yes, but then we'll need time to consult," Diane told the mediator. "May we have the room for 15 minutes? Judge Powell nodded, and everyone except Amara and her attorney left the conference room. As soon as the door closed, Diane turned to her. "This prenup is extremely restrictive, but there might be issues with how it was executed. You said you weren't given time to read it thoroughly or have your own counsel review it. That could be grounds for challenging its validity." "Will that work?" Amara asked. "It's a long shot," Diane admitted. "The Williams family has significant influence in this city, but it's worth trying." When the others returned, Diane informed, them that they would be challenging the validity of the prenuptial agreement based on procedural irregularities. Baldwin laughed, not bothering to hide his disdain. "Good luck with that," he said. "The document is ironclad." The rest of the mediation was tense and unproductive. Every offer Diane made was rejected outright by Terrence's team. By the end, it was clear they would need to proceed to court. As they gathered their papers to leave, Terrence stopped beside Amara's chair. "You're making this harder than it needs to be," he said quietly. "Take the $50,000 and move on with your life." Amara looked up at the man she had once loved, searching for any sign of the person who had laughed with her on beaches in Bali, who had once told her he was proud of her ambitions. She found nothing but cold calculation. "This isn't about money, Terrence," she replied. "It's about respect. Something you've never given me." His jaw tightened. "Don't do this, Amara. You won't win against my family." "Maybe not," she acknowledged, "but I'll know I stood up for myself." 2 days later, Amara was working late at Blackwell & Associates when her phone rang. It was Diane. "They've scheduled the divorce signing for next Thursday," her attorney informed her. "Judge Wilson will preside. He's friendly with the Williams family." "So we've lost before we've begun," Amara said, disappointment washing over her. "Not necessarily," Diane replied. "I've filed our challenge to the prenup. We'll present our arguments at the hearing. But Amara, you should prepare yourself for the possibility that the judge will enforce the agreement." "I understand," Amara said. "Thank you for fighting for me." The night before the hearing, Amara couldn't sleep. She paced her small apartment, reviewing the terms of the prenup again and again, looking for anything they might have missed. Around 2 a.m, she noticed something odd. The notary stamp on the document was dated 3 days after she remembered signing it. She immediately texted Diane, who responded despite the late hour. "Good catch. We'll add it to our arguments, the why." Next morning, Amara dressed carefully in a conservative black suit, her hair pulled back in a neat bun. She wanted to project confidence and professionalism, even as anxiety churned in her stomach. This hearing would determine not just her financial future, but whether the 3 years she had invested in this marriage would be recognized as having any value at all. The courtroom was nearly empty when she arrived with Diane. Terrence was already there, sitting with his father and Baldwin at the plaintiff's table. As she took her seat at the defense table, Amara noticed Terrence leaning over to whisper something to Baldwin. Both men laughed, and the sound echoed in the quiet room. Judge Wilson entered, and everyone rose. He was an older man, with silver hair and reading glasses perched on the end of his nose. Amara recognized him from photographs in Terrence's father's study. They had played golf together for years. The proceedings began with Baldwin presenting the prenuptial agreement and arguing for its enforcement. He spoke confidently, citing precedents and emphasizing Amara's signature on the document. Throughout his presentation, Terrence maintained a smug expression, occasionally exchanging knowing glances with his father. When it was Diane's turn, she methodically outlined the problems with how the prenup had been executed. The lack of independent counsel for Amara, the rushed nature of the signing, and most importantly, the discrepancy in the notary date. "Your Honor," Diane concluded, "these irregularities suggest that the agreement may not have been properly executed. At minimum, we request a continuance to investigate the circumstances of the notarization." Judge Wilson adjusted his glasses. "Mr. Baldwin, what do you say to these allegations?" Baldwin rose smoothly. "Your Honor, these are desperate attempts to invalidate a legally binding document. The notary date is clearly a minor clerical error, not evidence of impropriety. Mrs. Williams signed the agreement of her own free will." "And the lack of independent counsel?" the judge asked. "Not required by law, Your Honor. Mrs. Williams was informed of her right to seek counsel and chose not to do so." The judge nodded, seemingly satisfied with this explanation. "I've reviewed the agreement and find no compelling reason to invalidate it. The prenuptial agreement will be enforced as written." Amara felt the blood drain from her face. Just like that, With barely any consideration, 3 years of her life had been deemed worthless. Now, Judge Wilson continued, let's proceed with finalizing the divorce. What followed was a blur of legal formalities. Amara signed where Diane indicated, her hand moving mechanically, while her mind struggled to process what was happening. Across the table, Terrence signed with flourish, a smile playing at the corners of his mouth. When the final document was signed, Terrence laughed, an ugly sound filled with triumph rather than joy. Glad that's done, he said to Baldwin, not bothering to lower his voice. Easiest 50 grand I ever spent. Amara gathered her belongings, dignity the only thing she had left to hold on to. As she stood to leave, Terrence caught her eye across the table. No hard feelings, he said with a smirk. It was fun while it lasted. The cruelty of his dismissal after 3 years together struck Amara like a physical blow, but she refused to let him see her pain. Instead, she straightened her shoulders and met his gaze directly. Goodbye, Terrence, she said simply, then turned and walked away, head held high despite the ache in her chest. Outside the courtroom, Diane caught up with her. I'm sorry, Amara. We did everything we could. I know, Amara replied. Thank you for trying. What will you do now? Amara took a deep breath, forcing back tears that threatened to fall. The only thing I can do, move forward. Focus on my career. Build a life that doesn't depend on anyone else. What neither of them knew as they walked out of the courthouse was that the story was far from over. The prenuptial agreement that Judge Wilson had so quickly enforced contained a fatal flaw, one that would eventually be discovered by someone with fresh eyes and meticulous attention to detail. Someone who wasn't intimidated by the Williams' name or their influence. But for now, Amara left the courthouse feeling defeated, unaware that in a few months' time everything would change. The scales of justice, currently tipped so heavily in Terrence's favor, were about to find their balance in a way no one expected. 3 months after the divorce, Amara threw herself into her work at Blackwell and Associates. The firm's glass and steel office tower became more familiar than her small apartment, where she rarely spent time except to sleep. Work was her salvation, the one place where her intelligence and dedication were valued, where the Williams name held no power. On a rainy Tuesday morning, Leonard Blackwell, the firm's founding partner, called Amara into his office. Rain streaked down the floor-to-ceiling windows behind his desk, turning the city into a watercolor painting of grays and blues. Take a seat, Amara, he said, gesturing to one of the leather chairs facing his desk. How are you settling in? Very well, sir, she replied. I'm grateful for the opportunity. Leonard nodded, studying her with keen eyes that had intimidated opponents in courtrooms for over 40 years. Your work has been exceptional. The Harrington brief in particular impressed me. Thank you, sir. Which is why I've decided to assign you to a new case. He slid a file across his desk. Pro bono work. Normally, we wouldn't assign this to a first-year associate, but I think you're the right person for it. Amara opened the file and scanned the first page. A young woman named Kendra was seeking help with a divorce from her wealthy husband. The details were painfully familiar. A rushed prenuptial agreement, a husband from a prominent family, a wife being offered far less than she deserved. I understand if this hits too close to home, Leonard said quietly. You can decline. Amara looked up, surprised by his knowledge of her personal situation. She had been careful not to discuss her divorce at work. Leonard's expression softened slightly. This city runs on gossip, Amara, and the Williams family makes sure their version of events is the one people hear. Heat crept into Amara's cheeks. What are they saying? Nothing worth repeating, Leonard assured her. What matters is that you've proven yourself here through your work, not your connections or your past. So the case. Can you handle it? Amara looked down at the file again. Here was a chance to help someone in the position she had been in. Someone who might not otherwise have access to quality legal representation against a powerful family. Yes, she said firmly. I can handle it. Good. You'll be working with Maya Bennett. She's new. Just transferred from our Chicago office. Brilliant researcher but needs courtroom experience. I think you two will complement each other well. Later that afternoon, Amara met Maya in one of the firm's conference rooms. Maya was younger than Amara had expected, probably fresh out of law school, with close-cropped hair and glasses that kept sliding down her nose. She had spread the case files across the conference table in neat, organized stacks. "I've been reviewing the documentation," Maya said after introductions. "The prenup looks problematic. The husband's family rushed it through just days before the wedding." "Classic pressure tactic," Amara commented, unable to keep the bitterness from her voice. Maya glanced up, eyes sharp behind her glasses. "You've seen this before?" "Something similar," Amara said vaguely, not wanting to dive into her personal history. They spent the next few hours going through the files, identifying potential weaknesses in the prenuptial agreement that they could challenge. Maya's attention to detail was impressive. She caught discrepancies in dates, questioned the validity of financial disclosures, and raised issues about the notarization process. "We should request the original signed copy," Maya suggested. "Sometimes things show up on the original that aren't visible on scanned copies." "Good idea," Amara agreed. "We can file a motion for discovery tomorrow." As they packed up for the evening, Maya hesitated. "I know we just met, but would you want to grab dinner? I'm still new to the city and don't know many people yet." Amara started to decline automatically, her usual response to social invitations these days, but something about Maya's direct gaze made her reconsider. Maybe it was time to start rebuilding a life outside of work and memories. "Sure," she said. "I know a good Thai place nearby." Over spicy noodles and coconut soup, they talked about law school, career ambitions, and the challenges of being women in a field still dominated by men. Maya had graduated top of her class from Northwestern and turned down offers from several prestigious firms to join Blackwell & Associates. "I wanted to do meaningful work," she explained, "not just help corporations get richer." "That's why I came here too," Amara admitted, though at the time I was also following my husband's career. The words slipped out before she could stop. "Them." Maya's expression remained carefully neutral. "You were married?" Amara twirled noodles around her fork, debating how much to share. "Recently divorced. It wasn't amicable." "I'm sorry," Maya said simply. "Don't be. It was for the best." Amara changed the subject, asking Maya about Chicago, and they spent the rest of dinner on safer topics. Over the next few weeks, they fell into a comfortable working rhythm. Maya was meticulous in her research, while Amara developed their legal strategy. They met with their client, Kendra, whose situation echoed Amara's own experience in ways that were sometimes difficult to bear. But Amara channeled her personal pain into determination, vowing that Kendra would get the fair treatment she herself had been denied. One evening, as they worked late preparing for a preliminary hearing, Maya suddenly sat up straight, staring at her computer screen. "Amara, look at this," she said urgently. Amara moved to Maya's side of the table. On the screen was a scanned copy of Kendra's prenuptial agreement, zoomed in on the notary section. "The notary stamp," Maya said, pointing to the faint image. "It expired a month before the document was supposedly notarized." Amara leaned closer. "You're right. Good catch." "This invalidates the entire agreement," Maya said excitedly. "Without proper notarization, it's unenforceable. We'll need to verify this with the original document," Amara cautioned. "But if you're right, this changes everything for Kendra." Maya nodded, then hesitated. "It made me wonder about other prenups from that law firm. If they were careless with this one." Something clicked in Amara's mind. Which firm handled Kendra's prenup? Baldwin and Associates. The same firm that had handled Terrence's family's legal affairs. The same attorney who had rushed her through signing her own prenuptial agreement. "Maya," Amara said slowly, "would you mind looking at one more document tonight?" Of course not. Amara went to her office and returned with a copy of her own divorce file, including the prenuptial agreement that had been presented in court. She had kept it as a reminder, though looking at it still brought back painful memories. She placed it on the table. This is my prenup, from my divorce. Maya's eyes widened slightly, but she didn't comment. Instead, she opened the file and began examining the document with the same careful attention she had given Kendra's case. 20 minutes passed in silence as Maya reviewed every page, making notes on a legal pad beside her. Finally, she looked up. "There are multiple issues here," she said, "but the biggest one is that this prenup was never properly filed with the county clerk's office." "What do you mean?" Amara asked. "Prenuptial agreements in this state must be filed with the county clerk within 30 days of execution to be valid," Maya explained. "There's no file stamp on this document, no record number, nothing to indicate it was ever filed." Amara stared at her. "Are you sure?" "Positive. And there's more." Maya pointed to several sections of the document. "These clauses about waiving future claims, unenforceable under state law, and this section about maintaining separate property, it's written so broadly it would never hold up in court." "But the judge enforced it," Amara said, confusion and anger rising in her chest. "He barely even reviewed it." "Was it Judge Wilson?" Maya asked. Amara nodded. "He's known for being friendly with certain law firms," Maya said diplomatically, "including Baldwin and Associates." "So my prenup was invalid?" Amara tried to process this information. "The entire time?" "Based on what I'm seeing, yes," Maya confirmed. "And there's something else." She pointed to the notary stamp and signature. "This notary, Patricia Reeves, she doesn't exist." "What?" "I've been building a database of notaries used by major law firms in the city," Maya explained. "Part of a project I started in Chicago. There is no registered notary named Patricia Reeves in this state. The commission number on this stamp doesn't match any records." Amara sat down heavily, her legs suddenly unsteady. "They forged the notarization." "It appears so," Maya agreed. "Which means the prenup isn't just unenforceable. It's fraudulent." The implications crashed over Amara like a wave. The document that had stripped her of everything, that had allowed Terrence to walk away laughing while she started over with nothing, had been invalid all along. A sick feeling settled in her stomach. "I can't believe this," she whispered. Maya reached across the table and squeezed her hand briefly. "I'm sorry, Amara. This must be overwhelming. What can I do about it now?" Amara asked. "The divorce is final. You could file to have the divorce decree set aside based on fraud," Maya suggested. "With evidence that Baldwin knowingly presented a fraudulent document to the court, you'd have strong grounds." Amara's mind raced. "Would I have to go through another divorce proceeding?" "Essentially, yes, but this time without the prenup constraining the division of assets." The thought of facing Terrence and his family in court again made Amara's chest tighten. The humiliation of their last encounter was still fresh. His smug smile, his laughter as he signed the papers, the casual cruelty of his dismissal. But then another thought surfaced. Justice. Not just for her, but for others who might have been victimized by similar tactics. If Baldwin had done this to her, how many other people had been cheated out of fair settlements? "I need to think about this," Amara said finally. Maya nodded. "Of course, and Amara, whatever you decide, I'd be honored to help." That night, Amara barely slept. She paced her apartment, weighing her options. Taking on Terrence and his family would be difficult and painful. They had influence throughout the city, connections with judges and officials. They would fight dirty, they already had. But something had changed within Amara during these months of rebuilding her life. She was no longer the naive young woman who had signed a prenup without reading it carefully. She was an attorney now, with knowledge and resources of her own. And she had something Terrence didn't expect, evidence of his family's fraud. By morning, she had made her decision. She arrived at the office early, determined to speak with Leonard Blackwell before she lost her nerve. His assistant informed her that he was already in, reviewing cases for the day. "Do you have a moment, sir?" Amara asked from his doorway. Leonard looked up from his desk. "Of course, Amara. Come in." She took a seat and placed her file on his desk. "I need your advice on a personal matter that may have professional implications." Leonard sat back, giving her his full attention as she explained what Maya had discovered about her prenuptial agreement. She outlined the fraud, the failure to file with the county clerk, and the invalid notarization. "I want to petition to have my divorce decree set aside," she concluded. "But I work for your firm now, and taking on the Williams family could create complications." Leonard was quiet for a moment, his expression thoughtful. "The Williams family has a lot of connections in this city, as you know. Taking them on would not be easy." "I understand, sir. If you feel it would put the firm in a difficult position—" "I didn't say that," Leonard interrupted. "Blackwell and Associates has never shied away from difficult cases, especially when fraud is involved." He leaned forward. "If you want to pursue this, you have the firm's full support." Relief washed over Amara. "Thank you, sir. On one condition," Leonard added. "You can't represent yourself. Too much personal involvement clouds judgment. Maya can take lead counsel with supervision from one of our senior partners." "That's fair," Amara agreed. "And Amara?" Leonard's expression softened slightly. "Be prepared. This will get ugly before it gets better." "I know," she said. "But the truth matters. Justice matters." Leonard nodded approvingly. "Yes, it does. That's why we do this job." Later that day, Amara and Maya sat with Patricia Winters, a senior partner specializing in family law. They reviewed the evidence and began drafting a petition to set aside the divorce decree based on fraud upon the court. "We'll need to be thorough," Patricia advised. "The Williams family will bring everything they have against us." "They already took everything I had," Amara said quietly. "I have nothing left to lose." Maya looked up from her notes. "But everything to gain." As they worked, Amara felt something she hadn't experienced in a long time: hope. Not just for financial justice, but for moral vindication, for proof that the system could work, even against powerful interests. 1 week later, the petition was filed. Within hours, Amara received a call from Diane Rossi, her former divorce attorney. "Baldwin just called me, raging," Diane said without preamble. "What did you do, Amara?" "Found out the truth," Amara replied. "The prenup was fraudulent, never filed with the county clerk, improperly notarized." Diane was silent for a moment. "I should have caught that," she finally said, regret evident in her voice. "Baldwin deliberately concealed it," Amara assured her. "But now we know, and we're fighting back." "Good," Diane said firmly. "Let me know if I can help. I'd be happy to provide an affidavit about the proceedings." The next day, Maya burst into Amara's office, excitement radiating from her. "We've been assigned a judge for the hearing." "Who?" Amara asked, bracing herself for bad news. "If it was Judge Wilson again." "Judge Elena Carrera," Maya announced triumphantly. "She's known for being scrupulously fair and completely unbribable, and—" Maya paused for effect. "She has a history of coming down hard on attorneys who misrepresent facts to the court." For the first time since discovering the fraud, Amara allowed herself a genuine smile. "When's the hearing?" 3 weeks from today, preliminary hearing to determine if there are grounds to set aside the decree." Amara nodded, a mixture of anxiety and determination settling in her chest. "Then we'd better be ready." What neither of them knew was that news of their filing had already reached Terrence, who was at that very moment sitting in his father's study, listening to Baldwin explain the potential disaster heading their way. Baldwin's normally confident demeanor had been replaced by nervous fidgeting as he outlined the weaknesses in their position. "If this gets before Judge Carrera, we're in trouble," Baldwin admitted. "She'll see through the notary issue immediately." "Then fix it," Richard Williams demanded. "Whatever it costs." "It's not that simple," Baldwin replied. "They have the original document now, and your son's ex-wife has the full resources of Blackwell and Associates behind her." Terrence, who had been silent until now, finally spoke. "How bad could this get?" Baldwin hesitated, which was answer enough. Terrence had laughed while signing those divorce papers, confident in his victory. Now, that laughter was coming back, to haunt him, as a young attorney with keen eyes and a meticulous mind had uncovered the truth that would change everything. The courthouse steps gleamed in the morning sunlight as Amara climbed them, Maya and Patricia flanking her on either side. 3 weeks had passed in a flurry of preparation, gathering evidence, taking depositions, building their case piece by meticulous piece. Now, the day of reckoning had arrived. Amara wore a simple charcoal gray suit, her hair pulled back in a neat bun. She had chosen the outfit carefully, professional but not flashy, confident but not arrogant. Today wasn't about making a statement with her appearance. The evidence would speak for itself. "Ready?" Maya asked as they reached the top of the steps. Amara took a deep breath, steadying her nerves. "Ready." Inside, the courthouse bustled with the usual morning activity. Attorneys consulting with clients in hushed tones, clerks rushing documents from one office to another, police officers escorting defendants in handcuffs. Amara led the way to courtroom 305, where Judge Carrera would hear their petition. They weren't the first to arrive. Thomas Baldwin sat at the plaintiff's table, head bent over a stack of documents. Beside him was a younger attorney Amara didn't recognize, probably an associate brought along to handle the paperwork. But there was no sign of Terrence or his father. "Interesting," Patricia murmured as they took their seats at the defense table. No Williams family members present. They're distancing themselves. Or hiding, Maya suggested quietly. The courtroom. Doors opened again and Amara turned to see Terrence stride in alone. He wore an expensive suit and a confident expression, but Amara knew him well enough to spot the tension in his jaw, the slight stiffness in his movements. He was worried. Their eyes met briefly across the room. Terrence's confidence faltered for just a moment before he recovered, giving her a curt nod before taking a seat behind Baldwin. Still no sign of Richard Williams. At precisely 9:08 a.m., the bailiff called the court to order. All rise for the Honorable Judge Elena Carrera. Judge Carrera entered, a woman in her 50s with silver-streaked black hair and sharp, intelligent eyes. She took her seat and reviewed the docket before looking up at the assembled attorneys. "We're here on the matter of Williams versus Williams, petition to set aside divorce decree based on allegations of fraud upon the court," she stated. "I've reviewed the filings. Ms. Bennett, you're representing the petitioner?" Maya stood. "Yes, Your Honor," along with Patricia Winters as co-counsel. "And Mr. Baldwin for the respondent?" Baldwin rose. "Yes, Your Honor." "Very well. Ms. Bennett, you may present your case." Maya moved to the podium with quiet confidence. Over the past weeks, Amara had watched her transform from a brilliant but inexperienced researcher into a poised advocate. Today there was no trace of nervousness as Maya outlined their case. "Your Honor, we will present clear evidence that the HOA prenuptial agreement upon which the divorce decree was based was fraudulent in multiple respects," Maya began. "First, it was never filed with the county clerk as required by state law. Second, it contains provisions that are unenforceable under state family code. And third, most seriously, it bears a fraudulent notarization." Judge Carrera's expression remained neutral, but her eyes sharpened. "Those are serious allegations, counsel." "Yes, Your Honor, and we don't make them lightly," Maya replied. "With the court's permission, I'd like to call our first witness, County Clerk Daniel Ramirez." Baldwin stood quickly. "Objection, Your Honor. We weren't notified of this witness." "He's listed in our filings, Your Honor," Maya countered smoothly. As the custodian of records for the county clerk's office, Judge Carrera consulted her papers. "He is indeed listed. Objection overruled. You may call your witness." Daniel Ramirez, a middle-aged man with a meticulous manner, took the stand and was sworn in. Maya established his credentials and responsibilities before getting to the heart of the matter. "Mr. Ramirez, in your capacity as custodian of records, did you search for any prenuptial agreement filed by or on behalf of Terrence and Amara Williams?" "I did," he confirmed. "And what did you find?" "No such document was ever filed with our office." Baldwin stood again. Your Honor, filing with the clerk is a procedural formality, not a requirement for validity. Judge Carrera raised an eyebrow. State Family Code Section 237.4 specifically requires filing within 30 days of execution, Mr. Baldwin. Are you arguing the law doesn't apply to your client? Baldwin's face reddened slightly. No, Your Honor. Only that any failure to file was an administrative oversight, not fraud. That will be for me to determine, Judge Carrera replied. Please continue, Ms. Bennett. Maya's next witness was a forensic document examiner who testified about the notary stamp on the prenuptial agreement. Using a projector, she displayed magnified images of the stamp. As you can see, Your Honor, this commission number doesn't match any notary registered in this state. Furthermore, the ink analysis suggests the stamp was applied significantly later than the signatures, potentially weeks or months later. Throughout the testimony, Amara watched Terrence from the corner of her eye. His confident facade was crumbling, replaced by growing alarm as the evidence mounted. He leaned forward to whisper urgently to Baldwin, who shook his head slightly. After the document examiner finished, Maya called her final witness. The petitioner calls Amara Williams. Amara's heart pounded as she walked to the witness stand. She had testified in court before as an attorney, but never as a witness in her own case. After being sworn in, she met Maya's encouraging gaze. Ms. Williams, please tell the court about the circumstances under which you signed the prenuptial agreement. Amara described the rushed meeting in Richard Williams's study, how Baldwin had hurried her through the document without explaining its contents, and how there had been no notary present when she signed. To be clear, Maya emphasized, you're stating under oath that the document was not notarized in your presence? That's correct, Amara confirmed. I never met anyone named Patricia Reeves, and I never saw that notary stamp until the divorce proceedings. Maya nodded. No further questions, Your Honor. Baldwin rose for cross-examination, his expression severe. Ms. Williams, isn't it true that you're bringing these allegations only after failing to receive the settlement you wanted in the divorce? Amara met his gaze steadily. No. I'm bringing these allegations because I discovered evidence of fraud perpetrated by you and the Williams family. Baldwin's eyes narrowed. That's a serious accusation. Yes, it is, Amara agreed. Just as submitting falsified documents to the court is a serious offense. Baldwin changed tactics. You're an attorney now, Ms. Williams, yet you claim you didn't understand what you were signing 3 years ago? I understood I was signing a prenuptial agreement, Amara replied. What I didn't know was that the document contained illegal provisions, would never be properly filed, and would later be fraudulently notarized. After several more unsuccessful attempts to rattle her, Baldwin concluded his cross-examination. Maya then presented their final evidence, an affidavit from the State Notary Commission confirming that no Patricia Reeves had been commissioned as a notary during the relevant time period. Your Honor, Maya concluded, the evidence clearly establishes that the prenuptial agreement was invalid, and its presentation to the court during divorce proceedings constituted fraud. We ask that the divorce decree be set aside and the case reopened for equitable distribution of marital assets. Judge Carrera turned to Baldwin. Your response, counsel? Baldwin stood, his usual confidence notably diminished. Your Honor, while there may have been procedural oversights, my client acted in good faith. If there were issues with the notarization, they occurred without Mr. Williams' knowledge. We request that any remedy be limited to financial penalties, rather than reopening the entire divorce. That's your defense? Judge Carrera asked, skepticism evident in her tone. Procedural oversights? We would also note that considerable time has passed. Baldwin continued, avoiding the direct question. Assets have been distributed and lives have moved on. Reopening the case now would create undue hardship. For whom? Judge Carrera asked, pointedly. The party who benefited from the fraud, or the party who was defrauded? Baldwin had no adequate response. As he returned to his seat, Terrence grabbed his arm, whispering furiously. Whatever he said made Baldwin shake his head firmly. Judge. Carrera reviewed her notes for several minutes while the courtroom remained silent. Finally, she looked up. Based on the evidence presented, I find clear and convincing proof that the prenuptial agreement was invalid due to failure to file with the county clerk and contained provisions contrary to state law. More seriously, I find substantial evidence of fraudulent notarization, which constitutes fraud upon the court. Amara felt a wave of vindication wash over her. Beside her, Maya squeezed her hand briefly under the table. The divorce decree is hereby set aside, Judge Carrera continued. The case will be reopened for equitable distribution of marital assets according to state law, without reference to the invalid prenuptial agreement. Baldwin stood quickly. Your Honor, we request a stay pending appeal. Request denied, Judge, Carrera replied firmly. And Mr. Baldwin, I am referring this matter to the State Bar Association for investigation into the fraudulent notarization. I expect full cooperation from your firm. The color drained from Baldwin's face. Yes, Your Honor. Court is adjourned. We will reconvene in 2 weeks to begin asset division proceedings. With a tap of her gavel, Judge Carrera ended the hearing. For a moment, Amara sat still, processing what had just happened. They had won, completely and unequivocally. The prenup was invalidated, the divorce decree set aside, and Baldwin was facing potential disciplinary action. Congratulations, Patricia said warmly. That went even better than we hoped. Maya was beaming. Judge Carrera saw right through their defense. As they gathered their materials, Amara noticed Terrence approaching. Maya tensed beside her, but Amara touched her arm reassuringly. It's okay, she said quietly. I can handle this. Terrence stopped a few feet away, his expression a mixture of anger and grudging respect. Well played, he said, his voice low. I didn't think you had it in you. There are a lot of things you didn't know about me, Terrence, Amara replied, evenly. You never bothered to find out? So what now? He asked. You take half of everything? Is that what this was about? This was about justice, Amara corrected him. Something you and your family don't seem to understand, Terrence scoffed. Save the Righteous Act, everyone has a price. That's where you're wrong, Amara said, gathering her briefcase. Some things aren't about money. As she turned to leave, Terrence called after her. My father's lawyers will drag this out for years. You'll never see a penny. Amara paused, then turned back to face him one last time. Tell your father his intimidation tactics don't work on me anymore. And remind him that fraud has no statute of limitations. How many other prenups has Baldwin falsified over the years? The Bar Association might be very interested in finding out. The threat hung in the air between them. Terrence's expression shifted as he realized the implications. This wasn't just about their divorce anymore. His family's legal maneuverings, over decades, could potentially come under scrutiny. Without waiting for his response, Amara walked away, head held high. Outside the courthouse in the bright morning sunlight, she took a deep breath of freedom. That felt good, she admitted to Maya and Patricia.